I felt an emptiness in my heart when I realized that my granddaughter was moving away from me. Desperate to regain her attention, I created a web of lies and manipulations, but as I approached Gabriel, her friend, I realized I had crossed a dangerous line. Now, what started as an attempt to get back together could cost everything. Life seemed to change quickly as my granddaughter began to move away from me. The connection we always had was disappearing, like sand between our fingers. I used to be your confidant, the person who knew all your secrets and dreams. But now, with his new group of friends, I felt like an intruder in his life. Every message exchanged, every laugh shared between them made me feel even more invisible. The first time I heard about her friends, it was like a punch in the gut. She was excited, talking about them with such enthusiasm that I didn't realize how much she was suffocating under the feeling of loss. I knew I needed to act. I couldn't just stand by and watch as she walked away from me. So, I decided to intervene, but in a way I had never imagined. I planted doubts about those friendships, without her knowing. Have you ever noticed how they talk badly about you when you're not there? I started telling distorted stories about what I heard. With each whisper, the expression of concern on his face made me feel a mix of guilt and satisfaction. At the same time, I couldn't ignore the attraction I was beginning to feel for Gabriel, one of my friends who stood out among the others. The feeling of control I felt by planting suspicions in my granddaughter's mind soon turned into a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. As the conversations became more frequent, I noticed the way Gabriel looked at me. He was more than a friend. There was something about him that attracted me in a way I couldn't explain. Every time he was around, my heart beat faster, and it left me perplexed. How could I feel this way about someone so close to my granddaughter? One sunny afternoon, while my granddaughter was busy at a meeting with friends, I decided it was time to approach Gabriel more directly. I invited him to have a coffee. Deep down, I knew I was crossing a line. Yet the thought of feeling his attention made me feel numb, as if all my worries were evaporating. Our meeting started lightly, full of laughter and small confidences. Gabriel talked about his dreams, his interests, and I found myself enchanted. As he spoke, I couldn't help but wonder, how could someone so young awaken these emotions in me, now, at 62? The conversation flowed naturally, as if we had been friends for a long time. But as time passed, I realized that I was moving away from reality. I shouldn't have been there, and the guilt began to consume me. But instead of retreating, I found myself eager for more. A part of me wanted to stop everything and go back to being the grandmother my granddaughter knew, but another part, the part that felt alive for the first time in years, was pushing me forward. The connection with Gabriel intensified with each meeting. I began to look forward to his messages, often finding myself smiling as I looked at my phone, counting the hours until he could show up again. Every laugh shared and every look exchanged made me feel more alive than I had in many years. But at the same time, a constant fear accompanied me. What would my granddaughter say if she knew? I was playing everything I had built up on an emotional roulette wheel, and with each spin, the tension grew. One night, during dinner at home, I couldn't resist casually mentioning Gabriel to my granddaughter. His expression instantly changed. As if a dark cloud had passed over her. "He's just a friend, Mom. You shouldn't worry about that," she replied, trying to downplay what was becoming evident. But in truth, I was far from just worrying. At that moment, I realized that my manipulation had gone too far and that I wasn't sure how to back down. On one of our dates, Gabriel leaned closer to me, and his eyes shone with an intensity that almost took my breath away. "Helena, you are a fascinating woman," he said, and for a moment, the world around us disappeared. It was as if all worries and guilt were set aside. The desire I felt was undeniable, but the shadow of what I was doing weighed heavy on my heart. I was losing reason and ethics amidst the whirlwind of emotions. But as the days went by, I realized I needed to make a decision. Continuing this secret relationship with Gabriel could destroy not only my granddaughter, but also myself. Then, one night of reflection, as the moonlight streamed through the window, I realized that maybe I was just trying to fill a void that couldn't be satisfied that way. When the sun rose that morning, I knew time was running out. I looked at my reflection in the mirror and saw a woman I no longer recognized. The wrinkles on my face seemed deeper, and the sparkle in my eyes, which had once been full of life, was now mixed with uncertainty. I had to do something. But what? Gabriel had become a part of me, a piece of what I thought I had lost. However, I could not continue to deceive my granddaughter. I decided I needed to talk to Gabriel about the feelings that were growing inside me. Over coffee, as the aroma of fresh beans filled the air, I gathered courage. "Gabriel. We need to talk," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw a mixture of concern and curiosity. "About what?" he asked, but I knew he already had an idea. Silence settled between us, like a shadow that grew larger and larger. I knew I needed to be honest, not just with him, but mostly with myself. I took a deep breath and let out the words that were suffocating my chest. "I have feelings for you, but it's not right. And I can't go on like this." His expression changed, and the sadness in his eyes cut into my heart. "Helena, I feel the same way, but it's complicated. You know this can't work. What if your granddaughter finds out?" His words resonated like an echo in my mind. What I was doing wasn't just wrong, it was a betrayal of my granddaughter's trust, a line I should not have crossed. As we talked, I realized that the only way to not lose anymore was to get away from Gabriel. I needed to recover my dignity and the relationship I still had with my granddaughter. The feeling of loss began to spread inside me, but I knew it was what I needed to do. What will my granddaughter say when she finds out? Was I really prepared to face the consequences of my actions? After the conversation with Gabriel, the weight of the decision I made began to settle on me. The following weeks were a real challenge. Avoiding this became a constant struggle. Every time I entered the cafe, I expected to find him, but at the same time, I feared that I would. A part of me wanted to run into his arms. But the voice of reason always reminded me that my granddaughter came first. Meanwhile, I realized that the manipulations I had done to keep my granddaughter away from her friends were beginning to fall apart. She was getting closer to them, and with every laugh she shared with them, I felt like I was losing another piece of her. The guilt consumed me. I had become the villain in my own story. It was one night, while looking at the stars through the window, that an idea came to him. I needed to talk to my granddaughter. I needed to explain what had happened, how alone and insecure I felt. It might not change anything, but it was necessary. To regain her trust. I had to be honest. The next day, I decided to invite her for a walk. We went to the park where we used to play together when she was little. The sun was shining, but the light couldn't dissipate the tension that hovered between us. I looked at her, who was now a young girl, and the memories of our connection began to flow. "Dear, we need to talk about some things," I began, my voice shaking. The look in her eyes was worried, and it made me feel even more vulnerable. "I know that I have changed recently. I was feeling alone, and it led me to do things I shouldn't have." She interrupted me, confused. "Mother. What do you mean? You're scaring me." And there, in the sunlight, I began to open my heart. I talked about my loneliness, my need for attention, and how, without realizing it, I had let the situation get out of control. As she spoke, I saw tears in her eyes. What I feared most was happening. The truth was finally being revealed, and I didn't know how she would react. The tears that shone in my granddaughter's eyes were like stabs in my heart. The weight of truth had settled between us, and I knew that nothing would be the same as before. She was listening, but the pain I had caused seemed insurmountable. The anticipation in the air was palpable, and every word I spoke seemed to drag on, weighing more than necessary. "I didn't mean to hurt you, my love," I continued, trying to find a tone that was welcoming and not accusatory. I was so desperate for company that I let things get confusing and dangerous. "You were always the light of my life, and I didn't want to lose you." She looked away, contemplating the leaves that swayed gently in the wind. The silence between us stretched, and I wondered if I could restore the trust one had destroyed. Mom, you can't just do that. You can't just walk away and think everything will be fine. I don't know how to deal with this. It's Gabriel. Right? The accusation in his voice was clear, and I couldn't help but feel my chest tighten. Yes, I admitted, knowing that was part of what made it more complicated. But I understood that I was wrong. I shouldn't have approached him the way I did. I let myself get carried away, and now I regret it. Regret is not enough, she replied. Your penetrating gaze on me. You broke my trust, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to look at you the same way again. At that moment, I realized that the wound I caused was deep. I had manipulated her friendships to reclaim something that wasn't mine, and now I was faced with her rejection. The words I had spoken sounded empty, and despair was growing inside me. I decided I needed to do more than just apologize. If you can give me a chance, I promise I will work to regain your trust. I'm going to get away from Gabriel, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to make you feel safe again. She looked at me. The confusion still evident on his face, and I knew the road ahead would be difficult. The road to reconciliation was full of obstacles, but I was willing to face them, even if it meant losing what I had gained with Gabriel. I don't promise it will be easy, but I will be here, always, I finished. With the hope that my words would resonate in your heart. The air was thick with tension, and the anticipation of my granddaughter's response seemed to increase by the second. She stared at me, her eyes full of tears and confusion, as if she was trying to process everything I had just revealed. Silence stretched between us, like an abyss that seemed impossible to bridge. I need time. Helena, she finally said, breaking the silence. I don't know if I can forgive you now. What you did was very hurtful. His words were like a punch to the gut, and I knew it was the truth. The pain I caused hit her deeply, and the guilt consumed me. I understand, my dear. Take as much time as you need. I'll be here. Waiting for you, I replied, trying to convey how much I was willing to fight for her. The pain of being away from his trust was unbearable, but I needed to respect his space. As the days passed, I tried to focus on myself and how I could rebuild my life. I walked away from Gabriel, blocking his number and avoiding places where he could be found. His absence left a void in my heart, but I knew it was the only sensible choice. It was time to prioritize my granddaughter and the relationship I was destroying. The phone didn't ring, and the house seemed quieter than ever. Instead of approaching me, my granddaughter was getting closer to her friends. It was a constant reminder that I had ruined something precious. There was no denying that I felt isolated, but I knew it was the price I had to pay. One afternoon, I decided to write her a letter. I wanted to express my feelings in a way that didn't put pressure on her, just allowing her to see how sorry she was. I was honest about my mistake and about how much I loved her. I put the letter in a box and left it on the coffee table, hoping she would find it. Over the next few days, my routine became a repetition of solitude and reflection. I wondered if we would ever be able to go back to being the same as before. The thought of losing my granddaughter forever tormented me. Every laugh that echoed from outside the house reminded me of the joy we once shared. Then one day, while I was in the kitchen preparing dinner, I heard the sound of the door opening. My heart skipped a beat when I heard the familiar footsteps. My granddaughter entered the room, and her eyes were a little softer than before. "Hi, Mom," she said shyly, and I could feel a glimmer of hope. "Hi, honey," I replied, trying to hide the anxiety in my voice. "Did you read the letter?" She waved. And that made me feel a mix of relief and nervousness. "Yes, I read it. Anne. I want to talk." Finally, the opportunity to reconnect was there. It was the moment I was waiting for, but at the same time, I feared what might come out of this conversation. The room seemed smaller, and the air carried an almost palpable expectation. My granddaughter sat at the table, and I stood across from her, trying to decipher the expression on her face. There was a clear conflict in his eyes, and the desire to know what was going through his mind almost consumed me. I read your letter and thought a lot about all this. She began, her voice shaking. It's hard for me to accept what you did. I always trusted you, and now I feel like all of that has been destroyed. The words came out of his mouth like an arrow, hitting me straight in the heart. I know, and there is nothing I can say to make right what I did, I replied, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill over. I can only apologize and show that I want to change. You are the most important thing in my life, and I don't want this to separate us. She took a deep breath, and silence followed her as she struggled to organize her thoughts. I want to believe that you can change, but I still feel so betrayed. How can I trust you again? The pain in her voice was clear, and I realized how much she was struggling internally. Trust takes time, I understand that, I replied, trying to remain calm. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to win her back. I can be transparent, I promise to never lie to you again, and if you let me. I want to be a better grandmother, a better person. I just need a chance. Her expression began to soften, but the hesitation was still present. Are you really willing to walk away from Gabriel? He was important to you, and you let him into your life in a way that, well, wasn't right. Yes, I am willing. I realized I was seeking attention where I shouldn't have. You are my family, and nothing should be more important than that. I lost myself for a moment, but I want to find myself again, by your side. She looked down, reflecting, and I could feel the weight of the emotions that enveloped her. Time seemed to drag by. And the uncertainty about how this conversation would end made me nervous. When she finally spoke again, hope was beginning to shine. Maybe we can start again. But I want you to know that this will not be easy. It will take time, and I still need to process everything that happened. I'm ready for whatever it takes, she said. Gratitude invading my heart. I thank you for giving me this chance, even if small. I promise I will make it worth it. She smiled, a shy smile, but full of promise. Let's try, then. One day at a time. At that moment, I felt a weight lifted off my shoulders. Although there was still a lot of work to be done. There was a spark of hope between us, and I was willing to fight for it. The relationship between us was at a fragile starting point, and I knew that every interaction would count. Over the next few days, I tried to be more present in my granddaughter's life, respecting her space and showing my love in small but meaningful ways. I was willing to work hard to regain her trust. Even if it meant accepting silence and distance. One sunny Saturday, I decided to prepare a special lunch. I thought a home-cooked meal might create a comfortable environment for us to talk. As I cut vegetables in the kitchen, anxiety accompanied me. The smell of fresh food filled the air. But my mind was full of doubts. Would she come? Was she still willing to open up to me? As the sun began to set, my granddaughter entered the kitchen, drawn by the aroma of the meals I had prepared. Hi, Mom, she said, her tone lighter, and it gave me hope. Hey. Dear. I'm making your favorite dish. I thought we could have a nice time together, I replied, smiling at her. She approached, and as I continued to cook, I noticed the atmosphere was changing. She helped set the table, and the conversation flowed naturally, as if the problems didn't exist. I talked about the little everyday things, and she laughed at my silly stories. Moments like that were exactly what I needed, an opportunity to reconnect. During dinner, I tried to be attentive and listen more than I talked. It was a delicate balance, but she was determined to learn how to be a better grandmother. Time passed. And when dinner was over, my granddaughter got up to clear the table, but before she could go, I called her. Wait a moment, honey, I said, a little nervously. I want you to know that even though I made mistakes, I am here to do whatever is necessary so that we can rebuild our relationship. You are everything to me. She looked at me, her eyes reflecting a mix of emotions. Thank you, Helena. I know you're trying. I still have to deal with all of this, but I feel like we're moving in the right direction. A smile spread across my face, and I felt a wave of relief. The conversation had not resolved all the problems, but there was a growing understanding. We were opening up again, and the connection we had was starting to blossom, albeit slowly. After that dinner, the days became brighter. Conversations became more frequent, and I began to realize that the happy memories we had made were not completely lost. We still had a way to go, but there was a new commitment on both sides to not let the shadows of the past consume us. One night, while we were sitting together on the couch watching a movie, something unexpected happened. My granddaughter turned to me and said, "Do you remember that time we did a project together? Did you help me do that work about nature?" I smiled, remembering how excited and full of ideas she was. "Yes. You had so many brilliant ideas. It was so fun working alongside you," I replied. "We should do this again one day." "I miss us doing things together," she said, and hope began to shine in my heart again. "I would love that. Let's find a project or something fun to do together, what do you think?" I asked excitedly. She smiled, and at that moment, I realized there was room for a new chapter in our story. The journey wouldn't be easy, but we were starting to find our way back to each other. Time passed, and sunlight began to illuminate our path of reconciliation. The moments we shared became more frequent and filled with laughter. We decided to tackle an art project together, something that would allow us to express our feelings and reconnect in a meaningful way. With each brushstroke, with each color chosen, it felt like we were not only creating a work of art, but also rebuilding our relationship. One afternoon, as we were working on our canvas, my granddaughter asked me, "How did you feel when all this happened, Grandma? What made you lose yourself like this?" I hesitated, painful memories surfacing. But I knew it was important to be honest. It was a moment of weakness, I think. I felt alone, and life seemed so monotonous. As I approached Gabriel, I was trying to find something I felt I had lost. But that didn't justify my actions. "I hurt you, and it never should have happened," I confessed. His voice choked with emotion. "I understand, but it's hard to forget," she replied, the sincerity in her words making my heart heavy. "I'm still afraid that you might get lost again. I promise I'm doing my best to be the grandmother you deserve. I don't want to run after things that aren't true anymore. You are my true priority, and I will work to never disappoint you again," I assured, as a slight smile appeared on his face. These moments of vulnerability became the foundation of our new relationship. As the weeks went by, we became more open with each other, discussing not only our joys, but also our fears and insecurities. Through art, we were able to express everything we felt, and with each project, our connection became stronger. However, as our relationship grew stronger, I couldn't ignore Gabriel's shadow. The weight of guilt still accompanied me, and I wondered if we would ever be able to go back to what we were before. Insecurity about the past was still a ghost in our lives, even though we tried to move forward. One night, as we were getting ready for another painting session, my granddaughter looked at me with a worried expression. "What if Gabriel comes back into your life, grandmother? How are you going to deal with this?" The question took me by surprise, and the tension in the air became palpable. "I don't know, honey. It's a risk I'm willing to take. I chose you and our relationship above all else. I want you to know that nothing could be more important than that," I replied, trying to convey the sincerity of my heart. "I hope you remember this when things get hard," she said, and I realized there was still a way to go. Her fear was valid, and I knew I would need to be strong to not fall into the traps of the past again. The weeks turned into months, and life continued its unpredictable dance. Our art flourished, and with it, new understanding and respect began to emerge. It was a work in progress, but the sense of hope was there. One evening, as we were organizing a small exhibition to showcase our creations, a disturbing thought entered my mind. What if Gabriel showed up? What if he tried to convince me to come back? I couldn't let my past come between us again. It was a cycle I was determined to break. That night, after the exhibition, something told me that I needed to make a definitive decision. Life was made of choices, and mine was clear. I would choose my granddaughter in our relationship, no matter what it took.